Good morning. All right, you guys, this is episode 139, and I'm going to introduce something new that we haven't talked about today. Something a little bit different. And it's called CIRS. It's CIRS, stands for Chronic Inflammatory Response Syndrome. Okay. This kind of ties into what we've talked about around long COVID several episodes ago. But it also moves into the whole realm of like chronic fatigue syndrome. Okay. And the reason why I want to talk about this is so in the world of naturopathic medicine, chronic fatigue syndrome is sort of an umbrella term, even things like sort of fibromyalgia. We've been dealing with that and addressing that amongst patients for a while, right? And conventional medicine doesn't have a lot of options for chronic conditions. That's where that conventional medicine is fantastic at acute things, right? But when things move into chronic, they just don't have a lot of tools. And so we talked about this even kind of in like autoimmunity, right? That's considered a chronic condition. And so we're a little bit limited as far as, conventional medicine goes as to sort of, where to go. Now, in CIRS, Chronic Inflammatory Response Syndrome, I'm going to kind of lump it together because there are like chronic fatigue is in there, autoimmunity can be in there. And so it's kind of this umbrella diagnosis, if you will. Okay. And if you go online and you start looking for the information about it, there was technically an MD in the 70s who kind of created sort of the criteria that it's been changed over the years, but the outline on how to address this chronic inflammatory response. And really what we're talking about when we're talking about chronic inflammatory responses, we're talking about the immune system, right? The immune system we know is essential for our body to respond to illnesses. Our immune system, 70 to 80% is found in the gut. It's responsible for our microbiome in our body and on our skin. And so our immune system is really a delicate balance because it keeps us alive from foreign bugs, right? But the challenge is if it gets turned on and doesn't have a way to be regulated or turned off, that's when we get this inflammatory response. And it's kind of as if, things are always on fire, if you will. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's where it's a little bit different is when we've talked about immune system and like supporting the immune system for colds and flu and for illnesses, right? And that's sort of, it's very much of a balance of, okay, or even allergies is when your immune system is reacting the way that we expect, and it's regulated and it has an off switch, and then it can, go back to kind of a patrolling mode instead of an active, hey, we're, fighting mode, and not be triggered into this chronic underlying inflammatory kind of fighting mode. And so with CIRS, technically, there are like 13 different categories. This is what conventional medicine likes, is that there's 13 different categories, and you have to check one box from all 13 to be associated or to be diagnosed with this chronic inflammatory syndrome. Okay. Real quick, what they're seeing like for long haulers for COVID specifically is that folks are actually have 18 out of the 13 criteria. Oftentimes they kind of supersede the criteria for CIRS, but when we're always trying to address the root cause, we're always trying to figure out kind of what that, not just what the trigger is, but as things have changed in our immune system, is there a chronic exposure somewhere? right? So things that can often come up with chronic inflammatory syndromes are, okay, do we have things environmental, right? So not just the things in the environment outside, but like mold toxicity, right? Toxicity in our water, on our food. So not everybody has to be super strict with, like, pure filtered water, organic food, wash all your food first, right? Have air filters and the whole 9 yards. Not everybody has to be that strict, but oftentimes if we have a chronic inflammatory issue, the littlest exposures can really push us back into that inflammatory response instead of that immune system kind of relaxing, if you will, or not being as triggered.
Are allergies in that category too?
Yes.
Like cats in your house?
Yeah. So sometimes when we're looking at a chronic issue, we're always looking at, like, we've talked about detoxes and toxicity and stuff before, but sometimes it's not just like having a toxic exposure, but it's the level of that exposure, right? So there's a spectrum. So if we are already in an inflammatory state, if we are already in a fatigued state, if we're already in some kind of chronic situation, sometimes just the littlest thing can create flares, or can create sort of this downhill what is that called, flow of more symptoms, right? In that flare. So you may be able to, like, when you're feeling well, or when we've healed the body, like, you may be able to go out and have a pizza. But when you're sick, or when you're experiencing a flare, if you will, or more symptoms, that same pizza might create worsening of symptoms.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's like, let's just say you're doing good, and then like you have a stressful day or a stressful few days, which then you start to tank a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, well, I'll just use my life. Like sometimes the cats are in the house and I can handle it when I'm healthy, but if I'm in this downward tank, that could make it worse. That's what I'm hearing, because
Yes.
I'm allergic to cats.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it can be exactly like, there may be some days where, I mean, technically your allergy to cats may not change from day to day,
Right.
but some days it's a lot milder, right? Some days it's a little bit more intense symptoms. But if you're already, it's compounded with stress and not feeling well, then yes, this exposure is going to be worse.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's as if our immune system lowers that threshold. Okay. So when we talk about thresholds, oftentimes in an activation curve, this is how I learned thresholds, in an activation curve, right, is that oftentimes we have to have, it's a large curve at the beginning, right? Like we have to have so much stimuli, or like in our muscles, so many action potentials build up for that to fire, and then it fires and does its thing. Okay. But if our immune system is chronically inflamed, or it's kind of always on alert, or there's always some low level of activity with chronic viruses, with, chronic Lyme, mold toxicity, then that threshold, instead of it being so high, is a lot lower.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So then, okay, we got exposed to something different. It may not be unusual. It might be something, that you're exposed to on a regular basis, but it just lowers that threshold. So we kind of get a little bit more of a hair trigger with our immune system. So then it flares because it's doing what it thinks it's supposed to do, right? Like our immune system is pretty sophisticated, but those cells have specific driven purposes. right? Like they don't have the intelligence to say, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or oh yeah, maybe this tissue isn't what I expect it to be. No, it's programmed and it, has a specific job, and that's what it does regardless. So that's why we try to mediate that, try to reduce exposures where we can, get things out of a flare, address, those immune cells that are overreactive, that are going unregulated, try to, stimulate things like, before I say that, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. So what we can do to help to support the body, right, as we have this chronic inflammatory syndrome, there's something that's called autophagy or autophagy. And really, if you break it down, autophagy, the Greek word means auto is self, phagy means eat, right? So it's essentially you're eating yourself. But what it actually is all of our cells have this internal kind of self-destruct button. Okay. So when our cells become senescent, they become older, right? We know that as our cells regenerate, those old cells have to go somewhere. Okay. So they usually die, and our body's really good at recycling them. Now, what can happen with chronic inflammation is that we can have those cells that become inflamed, and then they can kind of attach to different places within our body. But then they're always kind of creating, if they're inflamed, they're always creating these SOS signals, right? Because they know that something's not right. So they create these SOS signals that sends out those chemical signals like cytokines, interleukins, things like that. But when it sends out those SOS signals, just like if we were to send an SOS signal, right, they're attracting more cells to come and help them. Okay. Now, whether those cells can actually help them or not is not always clear, but that SOS signal that goes out from that inflamed cell creates more inflammation and creates more cells to come to, help to support that cell if they can. Okay. When we support support autophagy in our body, what happens is that cell, all of our cells will experience a stressor, if you will, and then it will trigger kind of that self-destruct button in that cell. So then if it starts to experience autophagy, it will kind of self-destruct in a clean way. Okay, versus if cells have this inflammation or like with viruses, and the virus replicates into the cell, and then the cell explodes, right? If it explodes, it releases all these toxins, it releases all these particles, that again creates more inflammation. Does that make sense?
What do you do to, what do you have to do to?
So there's a couple of things to promote autophagy. We can do things like fasting. There's a lot of research on fasting. So usually kind of either intermittent fasting is usually what we recommend, because it's usually the safest for folks if they haven't ever tried fasting before. But what we see is a 16 hours of fasting and an 8-hour eating window during the day is a good place to start. The more autophagy will occur if you create a 18-hour fasting window and a 6-hour eating window. 18-hour fasting, 6 hours eating. To really, because what happens is when you're fasting, right, is that does stress the body, but it's a different kind of stress, right? Like it's a physiologic stress. So versus stressors that affect the adrenals, like fasting still technically affects the adrenals, but what we're doing is we're trying to stimulate that fasting that triggers the liver, that sends out signals that says, hey, okay, we're in a stressful state, right? There's no food, fuel readily available. We are going to pare down, right, to the essentials. So any cells that are sick, any cells that are old and inflamed, we don't have the energy, right, to keep those cells around. So we're going to practice autophagy and self-destruct those cells that are no longer contributing, right, to the health of our body.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how many days should people be doing that?
So we prefer intermittent fasting every day. If you want to jumpstart things, usually I have people consider fasting for 24 to 48 hours. Now, you can fast with just a water fast or a vegetable broth fast up to 72 hours. I often don't have people fast longer than 72 hours without some type of support, right? Without some direction from a practitioner, so that we have a plan. Yeah. Because technically, like, there are places in California that's a whole clinic, the North Clinic, and they just do water fasts, and you can be there for a month or 2 months. And so our body, we can fast for multiple months at a time. But you've got to be smart about it, right? So that's why I don't have people do over 72 hours without some type of practitioner involved in offering support. But
so to make it easy, like to jumpstart it, like a 24-hour fast where you just drink water and then possibly go to the 18 fasting 6 hours eating
yes.
kind of protocol. But for how long? Like how many days if you were to do it that structure? Like if you did 24 hours fast and then after that 24 hours you went to an 18-6, like how long would you, how many days do you do 18-6? Or is that like you probably should do that indefinitely?
The longer you do it, the better you're going to be. But I usually have people at least for a week. Okay. So if you started with a 24-hour fast, broke your fast, like say it's within that 6 hour, your beginning of your 6 hour window, and then started 18 hours of fasting, 6 hours of eating, and do that for a total of 7 days. That usually gets people out of a flare.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And also, like, if people are sick, right, with an infection, it also can be very helpful. If people have digestive issues, where it's like, oh my goodness, anything you eat kind of disrupts your digestion, right? Then sometimes, yeah, moving to an intermittent fasting of a 18-6 can be really beneficial as well, because you're giving your body kind of that time to repair, but also you're resetting your immune system, right? So when we talk about resetting your immune system, you're getting to change that threshold. So that our idea, right, is we want to get that threshold back to where it's supposed to be, because that's what regulates our immune system.
Gotcha.
Okay. We can do or foods and herbs, but foods to promote autophagy as well. Pineapple, right? Pineapple juice, that bromelain enzyme can be really beneficial. Polyphenols in our foods, like blueberries, pomegranates, resveratrol in red wine, or dark chocolate. Those types of antioxidants that we've heard of, the blueberries, the red wine, the pomegranates, right? They all have that dark purpley magenta color, right? Foods that are in that dark cherry juice, cranberry juice. So those have polyphenols in them, and a little bit of that resveratrol has been shown to really kick off autophagy. You can do, of course, if you're doing any of the juices, right, no sugar added, because that is kind of doing the opposite. They often talk about resveratrol and red wine because it's the most concentrated. There are some supplements out there that are just resveratrol that you don't have to drink or eat the food. They're made from red wine. There are some resveratrol supplements made from French pine bark. Yeah. And then I forgot the other one. It's another tree. that they're starting to do more research around. You can definitely add that supplement on. I mean, I'm always going to encourage, if you're eating more foods, right, and in your eating window, you're going to be exposing your body to constituents that help to promote that autophagy a little bit more regularly than just taking, 1 or 2 capsules once a day.
Yeah.
Things like ginger is very beneficial. The constituent in ginger, the 6-Chagall, is shown to be very beneficial. So we can do ginger teas. We can start putting ginger in our stir fry, or slices of ginger in your soup. They do have crystallized ginger candy, right? So it's crystallized ginger. It's usually crystallized because it's covered in sugar. Or you can get like ginger candies. There are some ginger candies that have the ginger extract in them, but don't have a lot of sugar in them. And then there's a lot of ginger candy that has high fructose corn syrup in it. So if you're going to go that route, pay attention and read all the labels. Okay. And then let's see. Ginger, turmeric, right? So we've heard about turmeric as an anti-inflammatory. Well, part of that anti-inflammatory piece is that it also promotes that autophagy. So
Gotcha.
so you could consider doing like a turmeric and ginger latte, right, during the day. Add some coconut milk to it, and a little bit of like cinnamon.
Is that golden silk or golden milk?
Yep, that's
Okay.
golden milk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, not all golden milk has ginger in it, but if you add ginger and turmeric together, it kind of kicks it up a bit. Yeah. So there are a lot of really good golden milk recipes online, or now there are companies that have golden milk powder. Like Gaia has one. All you got to do is, put a teaspoon in some warm milk, and it's delicious.
Yes.
And let's see. Okay. I'm trying to remember what else is on my list because I don't have it pulled up in front of me. Oh, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Okay, those herbs. Sage, rosemary, and thyme. Have you eugenol, good grief, I could see the word, but I couldn't pronounce it, eugenol in them. Oregano also falls into that group, but rosemary, sage, and thyme and oregano have the constituent eugenol in it, which has also been shown to be very helpful in promoting autophagy, again, reducing inflammation. So incorporating those, rosemary, dried rosemary or rosemary sprigs in your water, right? In your tea, hot or cold. It may take a little bit to get kind of used to that taste, but it can still be very beneficial, right? Yeah. You can even just have like a rosemary sprigs hanging up in your house, or a rosemary plant in your house. So technically, even just having sort of that aromatherapy can also be beneficial and kind of stimulating anti-inflammatory. So
could you have like and most of us probably have, like, what are they called? Where we have essential oils, and we put our essential oils in it. Diffusers.
Yes.
That would work.
Yes, so you can do rosemary in your diffuser, and that will work because you're creating sort of those smaller particles, right? So even though when we smell them, technically they're in the air, so it still potentially could be landing on your skin, right? Entering in your airways, and so it's kind of another way you're getting the sort of the exposure of those beneficial constituents. Another essential oil that's very positive, has positive research around autophagy, is citrus bergamot, or bergamot. Is often one that maybe people will see but don't know how to use it. Put it in your diffuser and help reduce inflammation and promote this autophagy.
I'm just imagining putting bergamot and rosemary in your diffuser. Like,
Okay, they may not
Be
mix that.
delightful.
Yeah, they may not, those two may not mix that well, right? They're both kind of strong flavors. I think the bergamot is a little bit more kind of a citrusy, a little bit more floral. So that one might be a little bit more preferred. But yeah. So the goal with these things, right, is really that we're trying to, we often say like generically reduce inflammation, right? But we're trying to trigger a specific mechanism to reduce that inflammation. We're not just kind of this blanket, right? Going in, we're really trying to help to support our body so that we increase that threshold and we really kind of reel in the resources that our body needs so that we can kind of get rid of those cells that are creating problems, yeah, and that aren't really contributing to the overall, yeah, our overall health.
Cool.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. All right. That's what I wanted to share today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. If you guys have questions, if you suspect that you have a chronic fatigue syndrome, a chronic illness, I'm going to encourage you to reach out to somebody. If you're seeing practitioners who aren't familiar with CIRS, the CIRS, bring it to their attention or find a practitioner who is. They may not be very abundant in your area, but there are practitioners out there that can help. Yeah, can help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that includes people that are newly diagnosed autoimmune.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
That's chronic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a chronic situation.
So I just want to take a moment to, this is what, March 3rd?
3rd.
Yeah. If you follow either one of us on Instagram or on Facebook, that's where I think we communicate most of the time with our people. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, is that where you?
Yes. Yeah. Usually
Yeah.
through Facebook.
Yeah. Email us. I'm going to work this year on getting better at that. But why I'm telling you that is because I am launching a 30-day behind the scenes. Go with me as I reverse my autoimmune diagnosis. And so I'm going to have a Facebook group. And if you are struggling with these things, or if you're newly diagnosed with autoimmune, or if you have had it and you're just wanting to like see what it looks like for a person to like really dive in for 30 days to reverse these diagnoses, I'm going to give you it all. Like the thought trauma, I'm going to give you what supplements I'm taking, how I'm moving my body, and the data. And then sometimes I'm hoping to have Carmen guest do a live in the group. So you can just get a sense of like, there's other things, there's alternatives. What would this look like if I went this route to help heal my body and support my body? So yeah, if you're interested in that, hit me up, info@KimberlyJarmanCoaching.com. That's my email. Just send me an email or find me on Insta, Kimberly Jarman Coaching. And I'll give you guys the link to register to go behind the scenes and see what it looks like for someone to just go against, like, no, I refuse to own these diagnoses and I refuse to feel like this for the rest of my life. So
yeah. I think that's perfect. Oftentimes we see different ideas, right, of what autoimmunity looks like, what chronic illness looks like. Oftentimes, yeah, it's not something that's often talked about in the media. And if you happen to know somebody who has a chronic illness, oftentimes you don't see that person very often, right? Yeah, you just don't see them very often, and you don't really always understand or have the opportunity to kind of explore what that looks like behind the scenes.
yeah.
I do have, this is a comment that I hear often, is that people will come in and either they have a diagnosis or they want a diagnosis because they're like, what can I tell my friends? Like, what can I tell my family, my church group? Because they look at me and they said, you don't look sick. Right. And so debunking that myth of what does a chronic condition look like, right? I tell folks, I'm like, it can look like just as much as we all look different, it looks different.
Mhm.
Right? But to help to kind of see, what we explore, what kind of things that you try, right? Like how things change for you in this next 30 days will be, very exciting. Hopefully, hopefully you have folks, who are following and who are inspired by, this leg of the journey.
Yeah, and like my vision is that they do their own version of their challenge within the
Yeah,
challenge. Um, because we're not really given a lot of options when
right.
you get that diagnosis. It's like, oh, you'll be sent to the rheumatologist. Good luck getting into that. And the forecast is that you're just probably going to be on a lot of pills.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just hoping that people get to join, feel seen, feel heard, get some alternative options for themselves, and then challenge themselves in the 30 days to tackle whatever they need to. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And then I think we should also mention to our people that we are hosting a retreat in May 2023, May 5th through the 7th in Sedona, Arizona. This is kind of Carmen's baby. So do you want to talk to people about what we're doing in Sedona? We're only taking 8 women because there's going to be 10 of us total. So me and you, and then 8 women we're going to take 8 women. You want to tell them about it?
Yeah, I'm excited about this retreat. Well, I'm always excited about our retreats, but this retreat's a little bit different. So, in that we're really exploring our own energy, our own power, our own frequency and vibrations. Okay.
Mhm.
So, I'm going to share with folks how or more about energy medicine. So we're going to talk about sort of the Chinese medicine philosophy as far as energy, meridians, and how to stimulate those meridians, what that means, how does that look, what does that look like. I'm also going to introduce like scalar energy and how we work on cleaning and charging our energetic centers. I'm excited because we're going to be in the beautiful Sedona, so we'll get to take advantage of the landscape and just the beautiful place and the energy that's there as well. So it's very much a retreat that really taps into listening to our intuition, right? Recognizing where we are, where we want to be, and really kind of stimulating that still our ability to heal ourselves, but a little bit more on sort of this energetic level. And I'm going to share with our ladies all of the science that goes behind some of that, but we're going to make it very hands-on as well. And so, I'm excited for you guys to join us on that retreat.
Yeah, I'm excited because this is going to be like, sometimes you think like, yeah, this is going to be a luxury retreat. So I just want to put that out there so the people that are listening, like, we are staying in a very nice house. We're going to have a chef come in on Friday night, and we're going to go out to a nice dinner Saturday night. So the food's going to be amazing, very healthful and healing. And we're also going to do a tour, a Jeep tour. Is that right? Of the vortexes.
Yes, yep. We're going to
Um,
see some of the vortexes. We will have the opportunity to hike some of the points. Probably, I haven't quite decided which ones, but probably the big ones: Cathedral Rock, Bell Rock. Yeah.
yeah.
There won't be long hikes, but it'll be an opportunity to just kind of really be in the environment, in the setting. If people want to take pictures, right, like they can do that in that setting as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be like very luxurious, very relaxing, but educational. Just a really beautiful little getaway. And the cost of it, so you guys can be prepared, is $1,222 per person. And we are offering, if you can either pay it in full up front, or you can make 3 payments. And I can't remember how much the payments are on that, but it has to be paid off by May 1st. So that way, if you guys are interested in this, you can already start looking at your budgets. So yeah.
I think the payments are $448. So you can put that first $448 down as a deposit to hold your spot, since we're limited in our spots available, and yeah, pay out the rest of the next few months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So the landing page should be included in the show notes here. So if you guys want to look and see and then get your spot, right, it's going to be first come, first serve. So the first 8 people to get their deposits in or get it paid for are who is going. So yeah, we would love for you guys to join us. But if you're interested, if you have questions, for sure, send us an email.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Excellent. No, I think that wraps it up for today.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thanks.